I think we got Josiah Hill back here, Senate District 39 Democrat of the day. Josiah, thanks for holding with us here. I'm glad we got you back here.
Well, I hope it works. I climbed to the peak of my roof, Matt, to see if we could get better reception. I've never had a problem over here, so I'm embarrassed that we're having a snafu here today.
No worries. I want to ask you about something specifically that Karen Housley did, and just get your thoughts on this. I mean, last week we had a case where the Senate Republicans, because they were angry at Governor Walz because he justifiably has extended the emergency order during a pandemic, decided to take out their frustration on the commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry. And they fired her, the commissioner, because they were mad at a man. Karen Housley, and I think one of the things that the dynamics here we're looking at is the Republicans are desperately trying to appeal to suburban women. It didn't look good for them to fire a woman because they were mad at a man. So they send Karen Housley, one of the more recognizable women within the Republican Party, out to justify the firing. And her justification for the Republican Party firing her was something to the effect of, rural wedding destination locations shouldn't have to follow fire code. And she was just, it is such a bizarrely small, petty thing. It clearly was an excuse. We talked to Susan Kent, the Senate Minority Leader, last week, and she said, of course, it was a made-up excuse. Talk a little bit about the fact that this is, here you have an accomplished woman who is doing her job as the commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry, and the Republicans, led by Karen Housley, go out of their way to fire her because they're mad at Governor Walz.
Well, I've seen a lot of behaviors out of this last session from the Senate Republican caucus, and it's pretty alarming. First and foremost, I think it's important to note that as Senator Gazelka, the majority lead, has kind of forgive the terminology here, but evolved, so to speak, but into that role. He's really adopted the Mitch McConnell playbook of obstructionism. They won't allow any debate. They won't allow any discussion or allow any kind of real change that our state so desperately needs to remain the leader that it is to take place. And, it's really clamped things down over in St. Paul. And the real losers are the residents of Minnesota. On the choice that their caucus made last week to go after the commissioner, it's unprecedented, it's strange, it's vindictive, and it's flat out wrong. The reasoning behind it that Senator Housley provided has no bearing on the truth or has nothing to do with what that was about. That was an attempt to score points, and I think it's indicative of the level of maturity and the level of seriousness that caucus holds as they move forward. It's not how Minnesota deserves to be led.
Going back to, I want to give a chance to revisit something we were trying to talk about a little bit earlier in regards to Housley's lack of focus on the district. And this is common. You get someone who their sights are set on statewide office or, maybe a lobbying gig afterwards, and they stop really caring that much about the constituents they're dealing with. As you talked about, you've got a steeped history with education here. You have Republicans right now, not just here but across the country, screaming, just reopen the schools, but they don't want to provide the safety equipment for the teachers. They don't want to comprehend the danger of trying to have closed classrooms with a pandemic going on here. Talk about those failures, because once again, as much as these problems are a pandemic and, a lack of safety equipment, this is where it comes back to home, because that's the Stillwater School District. That's in Marine on St. Croix. This is in Bayport. These are the communities that are getting affected by it, Forest Lake. And I can tell you right now, there's a lot of parents I know that, sure, I'd love to have my kids back in school, but the idea of sending them back in there as sacrificial lambs like the Republicans want to, that's not a good policy.
Well, we're in talks right now of how to achieve a safe reopening here in Stillwater School District. Like I mentioned, I'm a 20-year teaching veteran here. And there's nothing that educators want more than to be back in their classrooms and their workspaces with the students and families they serve. We're we're dying to be back there. We can't wait. And here's the thing. The rush back to schools is an important question. We want to be there, as I just said, but it has to be done safely, Matt. And as we move towards this, I recognize clearly the balance that we need to find, because reopening our economy is key. It's essential. And a part of that is getting our young people back into their educational spaces and continuing their educational journeys. But at the same time, we need to move slowly. We need to plan for this to ensure that it can be done well, that it can be done safely, and it can be done equitably, because if we do this in a way that doesn't serve all kids, then we're only going to exacerbate and grow the problems that we've seen over time throughout the country, and certainly here in Minnesota, as we strive to focus on equity and moving forward for all kids. So it's an incredibly complex question. In our district here, we're working hard to put the conditions in place before everybody feels prepared and ready and safe to move forward in that way. I know they're doing that same work up in Forest Lake School District and in Chisago Lakes as well in the northern part of the Senate District.
And, it's like I said, I don't know a teacher that doesn't want to get back into the classroom. But if by mid-October we have a third of the entire school district's teachers in quarantine, what have we really done outside of made things a lot worse?
Well, again, I want to make sure we take a long view on things. I think oftentimes people say this next session is only about this next session when it comes to the Senate, or that this decision is just about the month of September and what's going to happen in the month of September. Taking the long view, and I mentioned this earlier, and I don't know if you and your listeners could hear this part because of the technical difficulties, but the reason why I'm running for the Minnesota Senate has been influenced by the catalyst for this run was my experience as a father and as a 20-year classroom teacher. This is about the future of Minnesota, and as we step forward, the vision here is to not fall prey to or take the bait on a short-term gain that's going to be a loss. It's going to have a lasting consequence that's going to be so damaging. So we got to get this right. We have to keep our kids, our families, certainly our staff members, but most importantly, the spirit of an educator includes someone that is caring and wants to do their best for every child. Mm-hmm. And it goes well beyond the individual kids in those classrooms. They care about the communities where they serve, and this is about keeping our communities safe as well.
Josiah Hill joining us, Senate District 39 Democrat of the day. Let's talk about, you talk about the future, not just looking at one next session here. You are very much running on an environmental policy. Your webpage has you standing in front of a bunch of solar panels, which is cool. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing more and more of that, which is even more cool. And I'm a guy that grew up in the age where when people started back in the 80s suggesting solar power and wind power, they say, well, you can't possibly do that enough. And now, people are running to this as much as they possibly can. Talk about this fight, because one of the things that is still there is still this very loyal element to coal, gas, and oil that, they just, even though we have the science, we have the technology, it is clearly clean energy that can work for all of us. There still is the reluctance to embrace it, and we need to have people more like yourself who seem to have a pretty strong environmental policy and desire in the Minnesota Senate.
Well, I grew up here in Stillwater. I am one that has the honor of teaching students and family. I get to teach at my alma mater, where I graduated from high school. And where I grew up, we were not a short bike ride, but a long bike ride. It's fun going down the hill. It was a long slog up the hill to go fishing down at the St. Croix River. And so spending time there and later on as a young adult and in the years ahead to get a chance to ride on boats, spend time on the surface as well, the opportunity to be around St. Croix River allowed me to understand well and understand clearly from a very young age the importance of taking care of these beautiful natural jewels that we're so lucky to have throughout the state of Minnesota. And, the fact of the matter is that without consistent, without a break, focus on the health of that river and its ecosystem and the water that it contains. Even taking a year off of that focus wouldn't have allowed for this opportunity for our current residents and people who come to visit the valley and this wonderful Senate district to have. And so I understood from a young age. Now, you asked me about an image that's in some of our literature and things. Yeah, there's a growing number of those solar farms up in Scandia and Forest Lake, and I think people are going to begin to see those in every corner of Minnesota, because the simple fact is this: it's now cheaper to produce wind and solar energy than it is to burn coal. The coal lobby is strong, the fossil fuel lobby is strong, but we're beginning to see those stacks going offline and continuing to be scheduled to be decommissioned. We have a very large coal-fired plant, the L&S King plant here in Oak Park Heights here in this Senate district, that's soon going to be going offline and deconstructed. And while that's good news for the environment and for CO2 emissions, it leads to all kinds of interesting questions around making sure that we have a robust cleanup effort, making sure that communities like Oak Park Heights, where that stack is, have opportunities to recover some of that tax base and make sure that it doesn't just completely damage the local economy in those municipalities. And so we have all kinds of work to do as we transition to this new energy producing climate. But it's really exciting, and I think that when we pivot to looking at the transportation sector and taking the climate crisis head on, that we have some great opportunities to be the leaders that we often are here in Minnesota, once again in this way.
I like how you brought that up, because that has always been one of the problems. Is we always like spending the money on the front end, but when we have a mess behind, no one wants to pick up the bill. This is one of the reasons why I'm wary of pipelines, especially pipelines where the owner of the pipeline doesn't have to clean up their own mess. Or, sulfide mines, that in precious mining with leaving sulfur dioxide behind, because, that there's no obligation that these companies have to clean it up. And generally then it's a bunch of people staring around at each other saying, well, I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to pay for it. You got to have that plan in place really from the get-go, so that you don't end up having a case like what you're describing. And I'm pretty sure you'd be able to get in there and get the DFL to help you out with the funds to make sure that cleanup went correctly.
Well, I certainly know that there's plans underway. I know that the leadership in Oak Park Heights is working closely, and I think it's important to note that some of the utilities have been leaning in a way that we haven't seen them kind of lean before, and they're partnering on this. I think there's so many economic implications, and they're beginning to see and understand the future quite well, and not just in the CO2 emission sense, but in the economic sense. As I previously mentioned, it now makes economic sense to move forward to a greener Minnesota. And so I like how you referenced, Matt, your childhood. And I remember that too, and seeing some of the rudimentary windmills and as technologies were being worked on and developed, and seeing some of those solar panels on the side of homes that have been there for so long, and then seeing the new generation of technology. We've come a long way, and it's not by mistake. This is the only way forward. And change is hard for some human beings. I understand that. But as we look into the future, 1, 10, 20, 30 generations down the line, it's clearly the way forward, and I'm excited for our green future.
Well, in your district, how pretty is your district, for goodness sakes? Not only do you have the cuteness of the old towns, but, I was just up at William O'Brien State Park. You truly have one of those incredible environmental districts, and preserving that environment especially for the people that want to come and visit that district, is such an important element of it. Josiah Hill, once again, Senate District 39. This is the point, Josiah, where I make the comment to everyone out there. Go help your local Democrat. By all means, help them out, help your local race. But if you're in a race where it's a relatively safe Democratic seat, We need help in Senate District 39. We need to get Josiah to St. Paul. We need Karen Housley out of the Minnesota Senate. She's not helping. She's part of the problem. She's not part of the solution. Josiah is part of the solution. So if you want to help out Josiah, I'm sure, once again, the age of coronavirus, a lot of stuff is distance, but you have volunteer opportunities as well as also donations are always welcome, correct?
You bet they are, and we're excited to have gotten out early. We're excited by the response and the support for our campaign, and support that a DFLer hasn't seen in our Senate district in quite some time. And so we're thrilled for the support. And you've mentioned it a couple of times, Matt. This race is definitely on the radar and in play, and we are energized and enthused and fueled forward by the support. If those who are interested in learning more, please check our website. It's my name, josiahhill.org, where you can learn more about our campaign, some upcoming events. We're thrilled to have Aaron Murphy joining us for a gathering,
nice.
A virtual gathering, that is. We're having Senator Minority Lead Susan Kent join us, and working on some other events coming up as we move into September. And so we'd love to have you. If you're interested in more of the story of our campaign, our Facebook page, Josiah Hill for Senate, kind of if you want to flip back through that, you can see where we have been and how we've evolved in our campaign and grown. And just honored to have the opportunity here, Matt. We thank you for the opportunity. It's opportunity like this to spread the word that if we're going to grab those 2 or more seats and get the gavels back on the side that wants to do work, it's opportunities like this that help make that happen. So honored for the chance to talk to you today.
JosiahHill.org. That's JOSIAHHILL.org. I'll link to that on all the websites a little bit later on. Josiah, all my best. Thank you very much.